Let's grow together. And now for our message, I'll bring back Reverend Martin. A little bit hot. Okay.
This morning I'm going to be talking about a gentleman who is little remembered today, but he was the father of the megachurch. He was a well-known motivational speaker. He founded 3 hospitals. He was the founder of Temple University, and as I mentioned, the most successful motivational speaker of the day. His name is Russell Conwell, and he deserves to be remembered because his life can provide lessons for us. Conwell was born in Massachusetts in 1894, and into a family that was devoutly Christian and dedicated to service. And his family helped develop the abolition movement and the Underground Railroad, which up there transported slaves across the border into Canada. He was born into, as I said, extreme poverty, but the family did good work regardless. Frequently house guests in their home were Frederick Douglass and John Brown. And Russell was an academic, and he managed to be admitted into the prestigious Wilbraham Academy, but he had to really work to afford the tuition. So he had to work his way through school. And for weeks on end, he would eat nothing but cornmeal mush. Embarrassed by his homemade clothes, his positive attitude and friendliness to other students made him a popular student. He spent every spare moment in the library doing extra work, and he was devoted to that library, and he did well enough that upon graduation from Wilbraham, he was admitted into Yale University. While there, the Civil War broke out, and he immediately decided to enlist, to stand for justice, to stand for what was right. And he gave many speeches urging others to enlist as well. At 19 years of age, he was elected captain of his unit. And many times he gave money and other goods to his soldiers and their families to help support them. Now, he was presented with a ceremonial sword for his meritorious conduct during the war, and that sword was looked after by John Reike, who was a 16-year-old who was also his personal assistant. Cromwell was severely injured at one point, and John Reike told Conwell he would look after the sword. Unfortunately, not long after, Reike died, and his last words to his fellow soldiers were, "Tell the captain that I'll take care of the sword." For the rest of his life, Conwell vowed to work 16 hours a day, 8 hours for his own work and 8 hours for John Reike. After the war, he earned his law degree and got married, decided to go west to Minneapolis in search of a good career. So, to support his family, in addition to the profits that he eventually earned from his law practice, he also taught piano lessons and private voice lessons. And while there, he got a job at the St. Paul Press, and He helped start the Missouri Daily Chronicle and the widely read weekly Conwell's Star of the North. It was while there that he was able to have a broader platform to spread progressive policies and views, including promoting women's suffrage. Disaster hit when his house burned down, and shortly thereafter, Conwell was taken down with a severe but mysterious illness. Then the finances started to dry up, so the family had to go back east. Eventually, the doctors told him that he had a serious condition that they couldn't quite diagnose, but if nothing changed, he would die soon. Finally, they discovered that the problem was a bullet lodged near his heart, and after a successful surgery, he recovered his health. Conwell took a job with a Boston newspaper, and as a correspondent, he traveled widely for them and interviewed such prominent individuals as Charles Dickens. He wrote a series of successful biographies, including one about U.S. Grant. His legal work was largely pro bono while in Boston. It was the first legal aid practice in Boston, and because people needed a lot of help in those days, about 50 people a night showed up. He took what was called drunkards at the time into his home and cared for them. And ever busy, he started a Bible class, which eventually grew to 2,000 people a week. At the age of 37, he decided to leave behind his law career and a real estate license that he had picked up and become a minister. And he started by being offered a job at a small, struggling church in a small, broken-down building. And he offered to help them with the rebuilding after being asked, do you think we should tear it down or rebuild it or what? He said, let's rebuild it, and I will help. On the first day of their work together, he was the only one who showed up. So he decided to tear down the building, and curious passers-by said, what are you doing? And he explained the situation to them, and they started making donations. The church quickly grew, and one Sunday morning, Conwell was forced to admit that they couldn't handle everyone that showed up. So you had to get a ticket to attend the Sunday service. The tickets were free, but admission was by ticket only. And one Sunday, he saw a little girl standing out front of the church, and she was crying. And when he asked, what's wrong, she said, I can't get into the Sunday school. And he told her that he was going to build a Sunday school that would accommodate all the boys and girls who wanted to come. So he started raising funds for it, and sadly, shortly thereafter, the little girl, Hattie Mae, developed a serious illness and eventually died. Conwell conducted the funeral, and after the service, Hattie's mother came to him and said, here's money that Hattie was saving to help build a new Sunday school. It was 57 pennies. And Conwell took those pennies and sold them as a fundraiser. He raised $250, and one of the stipulations on this thing was that you had to approve giving the pennies back. So he raised $250, and then he sold those pennies and asked for the original pennies to be returned. And so it went until he finally had $2,500, which he needed to build the new Sunday school. At Hattie's funeral, Conwell told the story of her 57 cents, her life savings, if you will. And the congregation and he worked out a plan where these individual pennies would be framed and sold and then returned to the church. He then asked for those original pennies back and sold them, and he just kept selling until he had the money that he needed. Well, this church, as I mentioned, outgrew its seating capacity soon, and they had to, sorry, I'm working off of handwritten notes today. I normally have it nicely printed on the computer, and I didn't realize how bad my handwriting had gotten. Oh, okay. I meant to cross that out, and I didn't get around to it. Well, after the church was thriving, a young man came to Conwell and said he wanted to become a minister, but he didn't know how or where to start. And Conwell agreed to teach him one night a week, and they would open that class to others who were interested. The first class, one student was all he got, but by the fourth class, he had 40 students. And it wasn't long before the students numbered in the hundreds, and that became the genesis of Temple University. Eventually, his church became the largest Protestant church in North America, having 5,400 members. But if Conwell is remembered for anything today, it's primarily for his famous lecture, Acres of Diamonds. It was based on a Persian fable, and it goes like this. A rich person, Ali Hafiz, had a large farm with orchards and a lot of livestock, and he was wealthy because he was content. And he was content because he was wealthy. Well, one day, an old Buddhist priest visited him, and while they were chatting, he mentioned that you could buy the county if you only had a diamond the size of your thumb. And if you had a diamond mine, you could install all of your children on thrones. Well, when Ali Hafiz that night went to bed, he was a poor man. He hadn't lost anything, but he was poor because he wasn't content, and he wasn't content because he was poor. So the next day, he asked the priest where to find diamonds, and the priest told him, "Find them, and you will have them." So Ali sold his farm and all of his possessions to travel around the Middle East and Europe looking for diamonds. Eventually, broke and wretched and in rags, he stood on the shore of Barcelona, and when the tide rolled in, he jumped to his death. And meanwhile, the man to whom he had sold his farm one day was walking his camel, and he found a stone that reflected all the light and the rainbow's colors. The old priest returned, and seeing the stone, he asked, "Has Ali Hafiz come back?" "Oh no," he said, "that's just a stone I found when I was out walking my camel." The priest urged him to go and look. So they sifted the sands, and they found many more of these stones. Well, this turned out to be one of the richest diamond mines in the world, one that produced the crown jewels of Russia and England. Well, the reason Conway found so many diamonds in his life, metaphorical or otherwise, was because he worked for them. He looked for them, because spiritually, they were already his. They were already within him. Malcolm Forbes once noted that the Conwell way was always working and looking. Well, if you think that you're not good enough for diamonds, remember what an imitation diamond cost and what a genuine diamond cost. An imitation diamond has no flaws, but it's worthless compared to a real diamond, which does have flaws. Well, there was a young man who came to the Boston Lyceum to hear Conwell's message of acres of diamonds. He was very impressed, and afterward he stuck around and waited till the building had emptied. And then he walked up and introduced him to Conwell. And at one point he asked, "Do you believe everything you said tonight?" And he replied, "Of course I believe in it. Here's the deal. Put a high value on yourself. I ask for $500 a night. I get it, and I give it away." Well, it's estimated that Conwell did his Acres of Diamond lecture for about 500 times over the course of those years, raising $6 million. But he gave it away. So Conwell earned the nickname the Penniless Millionaire. And the young man who stayed after the hall was empty so he could have a private conference with Conwell said later that Conwell was one of the most fascinating people he ever met. And that's saying a lot because he met all kinds of people in his life. You've heard of that young man. His name was Ernest Holmes. So today, the message is there are diamonds everywhere. If you look for them, they're already there. All you have to do is recognize them and do a little work to mine them. It's all there. It's all there for you, and so it is.